It's Clipper Blog Live. Fred Katz here following the Thunder's 112-101 Game 2 win over the Clippers. The series now tied up at one game apiece as both teams head back to Los Angeles for Friday's Game 3. Here to talk about the game, making his big return to Clipper Blog Live, editor of the 10. He's been very busy with that. Andrew Hahn. Andrew, how's the ESPN editing going?
No comment. That's a weird introduction. I have no comment on that.
Look at the screen. Can't even make contact. He's lost the ability to talk to humans. He's too busy staring at a computer screen for so long.
No comment. I don't. Why are you bringing this up?
Because I haven't had the ability.
Do I go into your office and muck things up and kick stuff around?
In the forest. I haven't had the ability to make you uncomfortable on CBL in a long time, and I'm trying to make up for lost time. That's really all it is. In Los Angeles, we have the usual Patrick James. Patrick. And apparently Patrick is frozen right now, so we don't actually have Patrick. So Andrew, let's start with you. I'm going to kick you out with the first question as soon as Patrick comes back, and then we'll continue our talk. But the Clippers tonight dropped by 11, and there were a lot of issues tonight. Let's start it off with the rebounding, because the Clippers got out-rebounded by 16 tonight. After getting out-rebounded by 16 in Game 1, defensive rebounding in particular, has kind of been an issue for this team all season. What's going on right there? What's happening with the rebounding against Oklahoma City in these first two games?
So first thing, you said they were out-rebounded by 16 in Game 1, out-rebounded by 16 again in Game 2. I think we should throw the Game 1 rebounding disparity out the window, because the Clippers were making so many shots and their core players played so few minutes. It's kind of an outlier in terms of whatever rebounding disparity is developed in that one. As far as tonight goes, I think I made a mention of this during the game, that Russell Westbrook really leveraged his athleticism on the offensive and defensive end. Offensively, he was getting around anyone that was guarding him, really trying to get into the paint at will. The Thunder were doing a very good job with their interior passing, their backdoor cuts, and that causes a lot of the Clippers' big men to get pulled out of position as they try and rotate. Sometimes they don't necessarily rotate, but when they're not rotating, then they're also out of position anyways. Additionally, the Thunder, their wing players did a pretty reasonable job on the offensive glass. Kevin Durant had 3 offensive rebounds. Russell Westbrook had 6 offensive rebounds. It's the perennial problem with the Clippers these days. They don't necessarily box out, and then on top of that, when they have poor rotation efforts and poor help efforts defensively, it's a recipe for disaster in terms of rebounding.
And Russell Westbrook, man, what's such a problem with him is that he's got to be the best rebounding point guard in the league. And when you don't put a body on him, he's just going to sky in and get some of the most amazing offensive. You're going to say Eric Bledsoe, right?
There you go.
I love Eric
Bledsoe. The best rebounding point guard in the league.
I love Eric Bledsoe, and he's probably number 2. But if you're talking specifically offensive rebounding, there's no one who gets offensive boards the way that Westbrook does.
I'm still pretty sure it's Eric Bledsoe. Well, you can transition. I'm just going to go ahead and look this up for my own edification.
Let's do it. Patrick is back, and his internet seems to be alive. Patrick James in Los Angeles. Patrick, what were your thoughts on the Clippers rebounding, specifically Blake Griffin? Blake's averaging 6 rebounds per game right now in the playoffs, and he pulled down only 6 tonight. It just didn't really seem like he had any chance at having a good rebounding night with the way he played.
Yeah, I mean, there were times when he had uncontested rebounds on offer to him, and he didn't even try to go for them. I can think after a missed Thunder free throw where the ball would have landed in his hands if he had just stayed where he was, and instead Barnes had to jump across the key to get the rebound, which is just weird. I don't know what's going on there. There were a couple times when he had position in the where all he had to do is box out and he would have gotten the board, and it wasn't even a hard box out that was needed, just a little one, and but instead the ball he just kind of ball watched, and Steven Adams would come up with it. It just seems strange. You'd think if your shot's not falling, the main thing that you could do is crash the boards and try to take control of the game another way. And I don't know what. I don't know whether There's so many factors that it could be, but for some reason, it's just Griffin is not cued in or focused on rebounding right now. It doesn't seem to be like he's getting boxed out by the Thunder. That maybe is part of it, but he's also just not going for them at all.
Well, Patrick, let me hit you with this because the Clippers are kind of getting crushed on the boards right now. So, is there a solution to this? What is the actual solution that they can have as they go back to Los Angeles? Because there's got to be a way to get better because they can't consistently be losing the rebound battle by this much and continuing to just lose out on all these possessions.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they definitely can't. They can't give up this many possessions and be okay. I mean, I think part of it is it's a pet peeve of mine when people say it's like as simple as effort because there's usually so many factors going on beyond that. But I think for Griffin, a little bit of refocusing on and prioritizing rebounding probably wouldn't hurt. And that's the sort of thing that like a game-to-game adjustment can take care of. That can help. On the whole, I know that we might be touching on this later, but sometimes the pick and roll defense can influence the spacing and in terms of where DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin are. If they're guarding somebody way out on the perimeter, and when a shot goes up, that can lead to offensive rebounds for the other team. So maybe there's a little bit of adjustment that needs to be going on there. But I mean, certainly you'd hope that the coaching staff would be thinking real hard about how to address the problem.
Right, and something to note on Griffin is that Griffin averaged about 11 rebounds per game in November. In every single month since November, except for the month of February, his rebounding has actually gone down. And he averaged a season low 7.3 rebounds a game in April. And so this is not an issue. He's averaging 6.1 in the playoffs. This is not an issue that kind of started with the playoffs. It may have started back in April or the end of March when he really hasn't been rebounding much. But Patrick, you kind of touched on the pick and roll defense. Andrew, what was Oklahoma City doing that was so effective tonight to kill the Clippers in the pick and roll? Really, I mean, was it Westbrook's incredible effectiveness? You mentioned how much he leveraged his athleticism on both sides of the floor tonight, and man, when he's going, he's just. I don't know if there's a more fun player in the league to watch when he's going. He's just so good when he's got it, like he did tonight. But what were the Thunder doing specifically that really, really helped them hurt the Clippers in the pick and roll?
They're not even doing a whole lot schematically. I think Doc Rivers said in the post game presser, he said that the Thunder basically did what Scott Brooks had said that they were going to do, which is they were going to get physical and they were going to make their presence felt. And the Thunder were the more aggressive team on offense. One of the things that the Clippers really have a problem with, especially when the pace of the game gets really fast and they're not necessarily 100% plugged in or focused, is they have a tendency to over-rotate or not necessarily know where the man that they're rotating to is in the next possession. The Thunder basically just played as hard as they possibly could and then exploited all of the little mistakes that would mount up like a what is that thing when you're making like a snowball, like you push it on the ground. It's like it's yes, right. The thing that I said, the Clippers' mistakes. It's just a bunch of small things that continue to snowball out of control to the point where I think there was possession late, two possessions consecutively late in the third quarter where Thunder wing players, players sitting on the strong side corner, would get wide open cuts on the baseline to the rim for a dunk. I think Doc had to call timeouts on consecutive possessions because the rotations were so bad. It's not really anything that the Thunder are doing. It's the Clippers just not knowing what the heck is going on. It's their defense was almost to the level it was at the start of the season when they still were trying to figure things out.
I was just going to bring up the start of the season. It reminded me of Byron Mullins' lineup where you have two guys on the ball behind the ball in the first place, and like the cutter just has a wide open lane. It was really disconcerting because the Clippers had been such an improved defensive team over the last couple months that man, you're just kind of left wondering, like, what are they even going to do at this point?
Yeah, and something else to note as well is Oklahoma City had a lot of success bringing up DeAndre's guy in the pick and roll to set screens, right? Which kind of, we talked about this before the show. It pulls DeAndre away from the rim, which means that A, there's no rim protector there, and B, that can hurt them with the rebounding as well when DeAndre is far away from the rim and far away from the paint. That's a strategy Golden State had a lot of success with in that 7-game series prior to this one. So we'll see exactly how much Oklahoma City is going to be bringing up DeAndre's man for pick and rolls as well, right, Andrew?
I think that's not as big an issue because, like you said, Golden State went with that a very similar strategy. I think starting with Game 4, possibly as early as Game 3, trying to pull DeAndre's man out into the pick and roll, and the Clippers really tightened the screws on their defense after seeing that for a game. That really shouldn't have been an issue this time either. It's basically the same strategy. They just came out of a 7-game series perfecting. In terms of rebounding issues, defensive issues, DeAndre is going to take a lot of flack tonight because he's supposed to be the defensive anchor. He's always going to be the last man, the last line of defense in terms of rotation to try and stop people at the rim, trying to stop off-ball cutting, dribble penetration, things of that nature. Blake Griffin was outrageously bad in terms of recovery, and one of the reasons I would speculate that his rebounding numbers have been declining so much is that I think you said he was at his peak in November, maybe December, and then there was a slow decline until the month of February. Chris Paul goes out January 3rd, I believe, and Blake starts to become the focal point of the offense. In February, they had a pretty light schedule against a lot of Eastern Conference teams, but Blake was asked to do a lot more. I think at the time, Doc had said specifically that they needed Blake to rebound more and assist more and score more points, things of that nature, and then you saw that uptick for that month. Blake is looking to push the ball in transition. So when those shots goes up, you don't see him coming back on the defensive glass to crash the boards, trying to help DeAndre get the rebounds. It's probably a detriment that DeAndre's been so good rebounding this season as well, because Blake kind of assumes that DeAndre can go ahead and corral that board, make the quick outlet pass to him, and then Blake can charge up the court, try and initiate a quick offense and see if something materializes. But it's not a great habit that Blake's gotten himself into, and these are the results.
And you know what kind of the irony is there, too? You can argue the Clippers' transition is best when Blake Griffin actually does get a rebound because there doesn't need to be an outlet pass. The Clippers' transition is arguably the best it ever is when Blake gets a defensive rebound and he runs all the way up the court with it, and he's the one who controls the fast break, and it doesn't touch anybody else's hands, or he hits the lane and kicks out to shooters or whatever it might be. You can argue that's when Clippers' transition is the best, and we haven't seen Blake do that a lot in the playoffs, partly because he hasn't been able to get a lot of rebounds. Let's continue to talk about the Clippers' defense because this was a huge issue tonight. It was a huge issue the whole night, all the way from the first quarter. And I don't want to seem like I'm taking anything away from Oklahoma City's offense because Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant were, as Marv Albert would say, they shot the lights out tonight. And Russell had a triple double as Bob Sura and Ricky Davis acting as official scorers for that game, deciding that was a triple double. But Westbrook had so much success, especially early in the game when Darren Collison was in the game. He would post him up, and when he posted him up, the Clippers would have to come over to double, and shooters would be open. He would drive, and doubles would come over, or help would come over, and all of a sudden, Durant would be open in the corner. It was a serious problem with Collison. The Thunder offensive strategy was basically, all right, Westbrook versus Collison, huge mismatch. Let's just completely exploit this until they change something. Andrew, we only saw J.J. Redick for, I think, 27 minutes tonight. We only really see J.J. Redick in general for about 30 minutes tonight. I'm curious to know if it would be so bad if J.J. Redick were to get more playing time, and you could run out, Jamal Crawford at the point a little bit more, and you don't have to worry about Darren Collison, who has struggled as a defender pretty much all year and is not a great defensive matchup for Westbrook at all.
I wish. I like how you phrase this in a way. It's like, oh, well, is it a bad idea that we see Redick more often? It's like, of course I don't need a meatball down the plate, middle of the plate like that to knock out of the park. But just say it. Just Collison's not a good defender. Redick should be getting his minutes. It's something that's been confounding Clipper fans all season. Doc obviously is heads and tails better than the previous coach for this team, and far be it from any of us to question his decisions. But this is one of the, if we're nitpicking at kind of the things that Doc does, one of the themes this season has been his confusing substitution patterns in offense-defense situations. He really likes to go with Collison and Crawford for defensive purposes, and then Redick out there for offense, which seems completely backwards to me. Or, it doesn't even seem backwards. I don't even want to put this on a binary, because Redick is both good defensively and offensively. He should get the same amount of minutes as everyone, as the other starters on in the lineup. Maybe there's something else going on in terms of Doc knowing the egos or the minutes have to be managed in a certain way to appease everyone, to make sure that the locker room stays calm. Who knows what it is? Redick absolutely should be getting those minutes over Darren Collison. Patrick and I, both former UCLA Bruins, I'm personally, whenever I saw Russell Westbrook posting up Darren Collison, it just like, I would imagine like a thought bubble appear over Westbrook's, or not even a thought bubble, maybe like a speech bubble, because he's just going to say it. He doesn't filter himself. He's just like, we should have won the 2008 national championship, but you couldn't guard Derrick Rose, and now now here I am, and I had to play behind you, and I'm going to take out all of my frustration and not having a banner in Pauley Pavilion tonight. Probably says it every time they face each other.
And Patrick mentioned, I can't remember if it was after Game 7 against Golden State or after Game 1, or if it was even on air, but at some point Patrick mentioned to me that, hey, Russ rode the bench behind Darren Collison as a freshman, and maybe this is his payback series for all, he's had all this anger pent up for 7 years, and maybe this is his payback series to get back at him for playing behind Ben Howland, who apparently isn't good enough for Mizzou, so Mizzou can hire a Division II coach instead, though.
And a sophomore. He was
sophomore.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, but he got minutes as a sophomore. He didn't play at all as a freshman.
He didn't start as a sophomore, is what I'm saying either.
Right, but he got minutes. At least he got minutes. Didn't ride the bench at least, but yeah, I mean, he didn't play at all as a freshman. But I guess behind him for 2 years, and I think it's fairly safe to say that Russell Westbrook is a better point guard. I don't feel like I'm stepping out on the limb there. I think that's an okay point. Let's get back to Blake Griffin, because we talked about Blake's rebounding, and we kind of killed him for that. This was kind of the worst Blake Griffin game we saw in a really long time, like a really long time. I'm racking my brain trying to remember when the last overall Blake Griffin game we saw like this was, and I can't really recall it. And he struggled offensively, 5 for 13 from the field. Part of that was Serge Ibaka was so good. He was playing him to go to his right the whole game. Ibaka is someone who I always thought was overly praised as a defender for many years. He wasn't particularly disciplined. He'd bite on a lot of pump fakes. He'd be late to rotate often. He would really just go for the flash and the blocks really often. And I thought this year, I mean, he always had loads of potential, and he was always really young, so you figured his ceiling was insanely high. He just wasn't anywhere near his ceiling. Now all of a sudden he's become this unbelievable first team all defense deserving defender. And I thought he was just unbelievable tonight on both ends of the floor. There was a play where he made a layup on one end, and Blake got the inbounds, and he had like a 3-on-2, and Ibaka sprinted all the way back and actually manned Blake before he could get to the rim, and D'd him up and made Blake pass the ball off, and Oklahoma City just got back into their half-court defense. And that's a play that I don't even remember what happened on that possession, but that's a play where when you're forcing the ball out of Blake in transition, you're just it's so incredibly positive for your team. He was all over the place tonight. Andrew, I mean, obviously Ibaka was just, incomprehensibly great tonight, I thought, defensively. What were some other things that you saw Oklahoma City do to kind of stifle Blake?
The big thing I saw that they did, as you said, Ibaka played very strong defense on Blake, constantly pushing him towards the right. The other thing that Ibaka did was push Blake out as far as possible. And then when Blake has the ball at 18 feet, obviously Blake's very comfortable in that space as well, because he can face it. take a guy off the dribble. He'd play really far up on Blake as well. And Ibaka is, I don't want to say that he's the same level of athleticism as Griffin, because Griffin is otherworldly, but Ibaka's no slouch either. And laterally, he can more or less stay in front of Griffin and kind of shade him towards specific directions, even in face-up situations. When they had Kendrick Perkins on him, Kendrick Perkins is a very large individual, not someone that Blake can necessarily back down, and they wouldn't put Perkins on Griffin in those situations where Blake could go ahead and face up and get the ball. Those situations you mentioned where Ibaka kind of forced Griffin to pass up the ball in transition, Oklahoma City made a concerted effort in their transition D to load up the strong side of the floor, whatever side that Griffin's on. And if you go back over the season, especially in the second half when Blake was doing a lot of offense initiation after getting an outlet pass, things like that, you'll see that there are some times where there'll be 1-on-3s or 1-on-4s, and Blake will go ahead and take it to the rim, and other times there'll be similar disparities in terms of Blake being out by himself, and he won't go. Pretty much the reason why is he'll look at the backline defender, and if there's another big guy back right behind the first man that's guarding him, Blake's not going to go. He's going to hold the ball up. He's going to bring the ball out, kick the ball back out to Chris Paul, and run their usual stuff. But if he sees a small guy back there, or if he sees that the backline defender is late getting back, then he'll go ahead and blow by the first defender. Oklahoma City was very, very cognizant of all of that, and anytime you saw Blake with the ball, if Ibaka was guarding him, then you'd see Perkins kind of shade over and not necessarily double, but at least it's like stunting the double. You're coming with the threat of a double. Those are the key things in what confused Griffin into such a poor offensive effort tonight.
Yeah, and I wouldn't disagree with any of that. I would also add, though, that when Ibaka was having success guarding Griffin one-on-one in the first half, the Clippers did a really bad job of getting away from trying to feed Griffin on the post or the block, and they should have been playing to their strengths, which is the pick and roll, and trying to get some of that high-low action that's been so successful for them. But they didn't seem to be going for any of that. In the second half, in the third quarter, Griffin knocked down a couple shots, and it was like, okay, maybe he's found a bit of confidence and he's going to start changing things. And the Clippers started to, they looked like they were about to start running some pick and rolls, and they got called for 2 offensive fouls on screens in 3 or 4 possessions. And then it was just kind of the wheels fell off, doesn't matter, game's over. It's a 20-point game in the span of a couple more possessions. So that kind of seemed like as soon as the Clippers figured out what they should be doing, they tried to start doing it, and then they shot themselves in the feet with those moving screen calls.
Right. Piggybacking off of Patrick's reference to the high pick and roll that they had so much success with in Game 1, Fred, I think you made a mention of this during the game as well about why they weren't running it. And I guess for people that don't necessarily know what we're talking about, the high pick and roll with Chris Paul and Blake Griffin, where they set a pick at the top of the key, Blake comes off, Chris comes off of the pick, and Blake does a short roll basically to about the free throw line. Chris will throw a pocket pass, and then Blake basically has the decision to shoot the free throw, drive to the rim, lob it to DeAndre at the rim, or kick it to the corners if either of those corner guys come off of their man. It's like the unstoppable play that we've been beating our drums on since, I don't know, I want to say January this year. But I thought in the first 6 minutes of this game, Barnes was hot, Redick was hot. Blake really wasn't forcing the issue. He was kind of going within the flow of the offense, and if the shooters are going to be hot, he's going to try and kick the ball to them. And then Chris Paul had 2 fouls, I think, with 7 minutes left in the first quarter, and Doc pulled him out. Fred, do you think it's as simple as that in terms of not running that pick and roll over and over again? You don't have Chris Paul for 7 minutes in the first quarter.
Yeah, it could be, but I didn't really see them do that in the first quarter either. Honestly, I genuinely believe that if the Clippers just ran that every single time, then Oklahoma City would still have nothing to do to stop it. Like, I just don't think it's a guardable play if the Clippers run it to perfection. It has everything to do with how the Clippers run it, and not necessarily how Oklahoma City defends it. Because if Oklahoma City is going to send two guys, the way that Chris Paul is shooting, Oklahoma City has to send somebody at Chris Paul. Because if he gets around the screen, he's either going to put up an open three, or he's going to knock down that mid-range shot from the elbow, which is his favorite shot. So I don't know how Oklahoma City is going to stop it if Paul is on a hot shooting streak. I'm kind of confused as to why they're not running it more. I kind of wish they would run it more. I think one thing to note about Griffin from tonight is I just thought he was strangely passive. Usually Blake is outrageously aggressive going to the rim. He's actually outrageously aggressive on both sides of the floor. But tonight there was like one play in the first half where the Thunder trapped the guy in the corner, or they doubled the guy in the corner, and Blake ended up getting the ball at around 16 feet on the left side, that area where he likes to shoot bank shots, but he was wide open, and there was nobody at the rim. And you figure Blake takes one dribble, goes at the rim hard, he's either getting a dunk, an and one, or in a worst-case scenario, he's getting fouled and going to the line for two. And Blake tried to bank in a 16-footer, and he missed it. And I just thought that was kind of the weird microcosm of how just strangely passive he was tonight offensively. I think we can move on to some questions now. We've got one from at Lawler's Law on Twitter, just going back to the J.J. Redick discussion that we had before about Redick's minutes. J.J.'s handles aren't very short in comparison to Collison's, obviously. Could this be why Doc doesn't want him out there? Patrick, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, that's a good point. Redick is not a point guard. And neither really is Jamal Crawford, even though he has played point guard at certain points in his career. I think that there is still an opportunity for the Clippers to be successful with certain lineups that don't involve Darren Collison, where they could have, say, Redick and Crawford on the floor together. But it does pose a problem of the potential for turnovers, or kind of like the offense not running smoothly. If we're just saying that Redick should be getting some of Collison's minutes, there is a bit of an issue. That said, Collison doesn't have amazing court vision either. So there are certainly situations where Collison is on the floor as a point guard, and there are missed opportunities because someone's open in a corner, and Collison either sees him and doesn't think he can get him the pass, or doesn't see him and kind of dribbles around a little bit longer looking for a shot for himself, or a cleaner pass, or with a safer angle to somebody else. So it's not a cut and dry issue, I guess, is what I would say.
Right, and there are ways to stagger minutes, so that doesn't necessarily have to happen. We're not necessarily saying don't play Collison at all, but you can go with a no point guard lineup of Crawford and Redick as your two guards. And what you can do there is, if you want somebody who's a natural distributor, you can play Blake Griffin in that lineup, and you can run your offense partly out of the high post, and just give it to Blake in the high post and let him distribute. We always talk about how he's such a tremendous passer. That's something that could A, help Blake get going, and B, help shooters get going as well. That's an option as well if you're worried about Crawford's ball handling, or Collison's ball handling and distribution not necessarily being in the lineup.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I just also want to mention that Redick is a very good pick-and-roll ball handler. We think of him as an off-ball cutter, a curler, spot-up shooter, things of that nature. But he's also very good in the pick-and-roll as well. So it's not like he has no handles, and that Collison's ball handling skills are dramatically better than Redick's. The other thing that occurred to me is Turkoglu's been out for this series, and he's a ball-handling wing/small ball forward. That those skills would theoretically be able to mitigate the loss of Collison out there. Or I guess it's not really mitigating. It would just absorb the responsibilities that Collison would have, and maybe Turkoglu not being present is playing a bigger factor in terms of bench offense than we're thinking about.
That's a fair point. We have another one from T. Hodge in the comment section. Just getting back to Blake's struggles, we kind of talked about why he's struggling. He wants to know what are some of the creative ways that the Clippers can use to actually try to get him going. We kind of talked about the high pick and roll. Andrew, is there anything else that the Clippers can try to do to get him going? Was this just an off night, a couple of off nights, or is there something that the Clippers can try to change around to try to get back to third in MVP voting Blake Griffin?
There's not a lot you have to do. Blake Griffin has to crash the boards so that, like you said, he can get the rebound and push it without having to wait for anyone. They have to run the high pick and roll. We've already talked about that. There's another play that Dallas is very good at. The Clippers do it every now and again as well, a swing roll, which is basically a modified pick and roll where Blake and DeAndre will go ahead and set up a pick, and then Blake will pop out to one of the wing spots, and then DeAndre will have a delayed roll to the basket. That's also borderline unstoppable. The Clippers don't really have to do a whole lot to get Blake on track. They just, like you said, they just have to do it. Just do it. I joke around with friends like, hey, Clippers, just do the good play. Do the play that's good, and just do it over and over again. That's all you have to do. It's not that hard.
It's also worth noting on this question of getting Blake Griffin going and finding ways to kind of troubleshoot the problems we saw tonight. Griffin is a significantly better player at home, or he was throughout the course of the year, than he was on the road. Like, even just raw stats bear that out. It's something like 26 points a game at home, 22 on the road. And the Clippers as a whole, their differential, I believe, in terms of net rating, is a plus 10.6 at home compared to 4 point or so on the road. On the road, and I think that's something encouraging that the Clippers can, they can think about. Not the team so much, because you don't want that to be too. They don't want them to be overconfident going home. But I mean, I think we can reasonably assume that Griffin will be a little bit more confident, particularly because he makes free throws at such a higher clip at home that he's probably going to be a little bit more eager to get some contact and get to the hoop, get to the score in the paint, which he didn't do very well tonight. So I think that's like a reason for optimism with a little bit of evidence to back it up.
I think that's a fair point, Patrick, and the numbers do actually back it up. He averaged 26 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists at home this year, 22 points, 9 rebounds, 3.5 assists on the road, and the true shooting backs it up as well, 60% true shooting at home and 56% on the road. So he's way more efficient. The counting numbers are better, and that's something that you usually see a big disparity in role players on home-road numbers. You'd like to see your stars have less of a disparity in there, but that's obviously something that's true for Griffin. Statistically, he's probably better on the road. And yeah, as you said, the free throw percentage is better at home as well by about 2 percentage points.
Yeah. So I have a question here for you, Patrick. The Clippers blew Oklahoma City out in Game 1, completely unexpected. Mm-hmm. And then in Game 2, they were largely in it until about midway through the third quarter, despite having foul troubles, despite a large number of turnovers and like moving screen violations, things of that nature. Are you disheartened? Are you encouraged by the way this is the first 2 games have transpired?
Look, I think it's a great thing that the Clippers were able to go into Oklahoma City and get a split. I didn't really think that was going to happen. I wanted that to happen. I thought that wasn't the best case scenario, but I thought it was the best realistic scenario. That said, they could have won this game tonight. So that's a little bit of a bummer.
I mean, like they played defense basically, like you and I were saying earlier in the show. It's like basically the worst they've played all season.
Yeah, they were so bad, and if they hadn't let the wheels totally come off in the third quarter, they really could have competed. I know that the fouls were a problem, but it's not the reason they lost.
Right.
That's like explanation versus excuse. It changed the way they were playing, so that's an issue, but it's not the reason they lost.
Right.
Although they might have allowed it to get in their heads, which would explain it. I just think they just weren't very sharp, and they didn't do the things you need to do when you're not sharp in order to win. But yeah, I mean,
in the totality, it's encouraging.
Yeah, it's encouraging because it's like, okay, they lost a winnable game to a very good team. That you think, okay, they'll this game, if it were played at home, you would expect there are a couple more opportunities to kind of stem the tide.
Right.
Because the crowd and all that stuff that goes with that.
All right, let's go to some rapid answer because we have one more viewer question which I think we'll ask, and then we'll just go into a couple rapid answer questions that I want. I want literally one answer questions to these. Yes or no.
Word.
We'll go one word answers. What did I say? Did I say one answer questions? One. Yes. That doesn't make any sense.
No.
One word answers, and that's it. Question from Alfredo Rodriguez. You'll understand why I want one word to this, because we don't need to expand more than one word on this question. Could you see Doc Rivers using Reggie Bullock in this series as a Kevin Durant stopper?
Struggle face emoji.
No.
All right, now let's go to some more. That's good. You don't need to take your rookie who hasn't played in the entire playoffs off the bench to guard the MVP. I think that's a fair answer. Next one, Andrew. Will we see a double foul and/or a scuffle between Blake Griffin and Steven Adams at some point in this series?
Thumbs up emoji.
Patrick?
Yes.
And Andrew, you can actually expand a little bit on this. Who wins Game 3?
Tree, diamond, airplane emoji.
Is that expanding?
That's expanded. 3 emojis.
That's a lot of emojis. Patrick?
I will say the Clippers win. And I am 40% confident.
Wouldn't that mean that you think that Oklahoma City wins if you're less than half?
No, it's not a. It's like I'm 40% confident, 30% unconfident, and then 30% undecided. But still, that's still like a plurality, right?
So
never run off then.
So does undecidedness not fall in not confident?
So
well,
no, 30% OKC.
You're not decided about your confidence, as opposed to not being decided about.
There you go. Yes.
What needs to happen is his undecided and not confident have to have one of those has to win, and then you have to have a runoff against that and the 40%, and that's how you determine a winner.
All right, so we've got emojis and percent confidence. This is the type of analysis you get on this show. That's going to do it for us. The Clippers dropped Game 2, 112-101. Series tied up at 1 going back to Los Angeles. For Andrew Hahn and Patrick James, I'm Fred Katz. Game 3 scheduled for Friday night. That's at 7:30 p.m. Pacific. We'll see you after that. Good night, everyone.